Hello and welcome to Conversations with Elise Quevedo. Today, I am joined by sports industry executive, entrepreneur, and investor, Daniel Bernard. Hi, Daniel. Great to see you. How are you?
I'm great and very flattered to be here. Thank you very, very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Now, before we start, I want to tell people briefly how we met. So we are both honorary members of the Della Leaders Club, which is a global community of transformative leaders who want to evolve from a life of success to a life of significance. And a few days ago, we both spoke during the launch of the Global Technology Committee. After the event was over, me and Daniel connected on social media. We had a little exchange. We sent each other a few links. And then we jumped on a call. And I just knew that this individual was so inspiring, so insightful, that I wanted to share more thoughts or his thoughts with the world. And Daniel, I'm sure this is going to be the first of many talks with you. And this video today is inspired by an article that you wrote, which is titled, How I Learned the Importance of Gender Diversity. As a woman, for me, this was so refreshing to read. And everyone, by the way, I will be sharing the link on the description of this video. So please go and read Daniel's article because it is very powerful. And with that said, Daniel, what inspired you to write this article?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for reading it. I think you were possibly the fourth reader after myself and my mother twice. So I really appreciate that. I think, first of all, I enjoy writing, but the inspiration came from the fact that, gender diversity is hardly new. There are a huge amount of articles for many, many years, but they all have talked, or the vast majority have talked about the moral and ethical point of gender diversity, why it's morally and ethically correct to have women with equal rights in the workplace. And what I wanted to really stress here is that not only is it morally and ethically right, it's through my own personal journey, is that I learned that it's also really makes commercial sense, and it's so critical for businesses to have that, and it really impacts the bottom line. And as I said, I learned about that from my own experience, and I just wanted to share that because I think that's a critical path to understanding how to really implement it further going forward. Because when businesses just want to tick a box on something that's ethical or moral, they'll maybe give it a lot of lip service, and we've seen that. They'll actually make moves when they realize it can affect the bottom line. So if I could just do something in this world that can help expose that for what it is, and of course we learn best from our own experiences and our own mistakes, and so that's what I wrote about basically, and that was the inspiration for it.
Thank you for that, and I am sure after people watching this video, there will be more than 4. Guys, he's not telling the truth. There are more than 4 people that read this, I think I need to add comedian maybe to his tagline as well. But Daniel, not one person can achieve all. And regardless if you are a man or a woman, your article also speaks on collaboration. This is something that I strongly believe in, that I often speak about. So from your perspective, how do you see collaborative work between different minds and perspectives?
Okay, well, that's very interesting because it's really easy to say, let's just be collaborative. Actually finding the functionality to do it in an efficient way is a whole different kettle of fish. But I think what I'd like to just say is, if you would allow me, Elise, is just to give a bit of an example of what I went through. Because I think when you can say this is what I had and this is what I learned, because I wasn't that mature back then, of course, and that's why I learned the importance of it. I think it gives the clue to your next question on collaboration. So we're talking about 2004. I was a young man back then, and I wasn't, now I've learned what I don't know a lot more. And I'm sure in 10 years from now, I'll look back on myself now and say, oh, he didn't know much back then. We always get a little bit more wiser as to how little we know as we get older. But when I look back on how I was in 2004, when I set up a business together with my wife, that was the key. And I think back in retrospect to the sort of meetings we had in the early days when we had about 40 employees, and we had about 6 in the management team, of which my wife and I were 2, and we were co-founders. So, you know, this was helpful. Instead of her reporting to me, which I don't think is possible for your wife anyway, we were co-founders. And I think about meetings we used to have in those early days, and I speak about this in the article. And everyone in the room, apart from my wife, was pretty much just like me, all alpha males. We think we're, you know, we've got it, we're conquering the world, we're doing amazing things. Oh, aren't we so clever? And we used to have a typical scenario was one of us would bring an idea to the table, and then it was like an echo chamber. Everyone was like, great idea, great idea, great idea. And you look back on it, obviously, because we're all pretty much the same, very similar outlook on life. And then it used to come around to my wife and she'd go, I don't think so. And sometimes she could explain why she didn't think it was correct. And the reason why, looking back on this, because she came from a completely different perspective, different thought process. And when she could explain why, we would all sit there and go, yeah, she's right. But quite often she couldn't explain why. It was just an intuition, it was just a feeling. And that was frustrating for a lot of us. And it was almost like, oh, who's the killjoy over here? And understanding in retrospect how many times she was right and didn't let us, all of us males, just go off and do what we thought was right. And she aligned us to a slightly wider understanding, because it's not like her view was the right one, it's the collaborative effort and the dialogue together that gets to the better understanding. And honestly, I feel embarrassed to admit that if she wasn't my wife, the person I was back then would probably have either intentionally or unintentionally marginalized her, because it was, oh, it's a problematic voice in the room, and we all know what we're doing, so let's just get on with it. And I've realized how it's not, being different is the voice you want in the room, to listen to expand your knowledge, to take your decisions to a different level. And if she wasn't my wife, I fear that, first of all, the business would never have succeeded in the way it did, and we wouldn't have, as a group, been able to go forward. So I'd like other people to understand that. And that was, I think, you know, going back to the inspiration, that was the inspiration that I felt for my article, and I wanted other people to feel for my own misunderstandings as a young man. And when I think about how that can be taken forward collaboratively, so I think the key is that it's great that you have different personalities and different backgrounds, you come from different perspectives. And by the way, it's not just about women, it's about different, okay? And there's power in being different. But the point is, and at least you and I have spoken about this a few times, it's being different together. And what does that actually mean? Instead of just being a fancy slogan, it means you're all tied, in my opinion, by similar core values, okay? If you have completely different core values from people, and when I say core values, I mean the way you look at the world, what's important to you as a person. If you have different core values and your different backgrounds, you're probably not ever going to be pushing forward things together. But the key is, and this is where the magic can happen, if you have core values that are similar, and those don't change, or not much over time anyway, but you have different perspectives, all anchored around the same core values, that's when the magic can happen. And when I've hired senior managers, senior tech leads even, it's really important to me to understand, what are you about? What's important to you in life? Because I know that if they've got the skill set, but they are aligned in a way they approach life, then we can do things together fantastically. And there's an alignment on vision. So anyway, I'm babbling a little bit, but I think that answers. I think the key is to have different people in the room, but aligned and anchored according to their core values, and then you can have fantastic things happen.
And this is exactly why we're doing this video, because we may come from different backgrounds, we may be men and women, but guess what? Our ways of thinking, the values are so similar. And what you've just said, everybody listening, please pay attention to what Daniel said. This is not about a fight. And again, he was right. We've spoken about this topic a couple of times. It is not about fighting against each other. It's about bringing together different mindsets, different perspectives, and then coming to a common solution, regardless of what gender you are. So if we can together, no, I wouldn't say change people's minds, but your own example. This is what I love, real life examples that you said, oh, I was an alpha male and I was surrounded by this. And if it wasn't my wife, I would have technically put her to the side. How powerful is that? And by the way, congratulations to your wife and to you for surviving working together. This is also something that not many people can do. So congrats to both. But that learning, you've got that extra patience, but this doesn't happen. And this actually is what now leads me to the next question, because whether it's in the technology, the investing, or the sporting industries, they are all very male dominated in the way you explained, very alpha male, men are up here, women are down here. So what can we do to get more women inspired and to also get them in these industries so that gender misbalance decreases a little bit?
So I think we're on the right track, to be honest. I mean, I'm excited to see a lot of even very senior executives coming into the sports sector who are women. And I think in order to push it more, it's all about education, but it's education on both sides, and I'll explain. So first of all, we need men, all of us men, to understand that it is, as I said before, a good business move to get different people in the room, and one option for difference is women, because once you understand that if you're limited to your own mind, let's get other people's voices in the room. If they understand that this is good for business, because I really think that the vast majority of men are not sexist pigs, okay? I think that they are fine with gender equality, but again, trying to make this move, if they understand that it helps them financially, and then they'll be absolutely happy to do it. Even though there are a lot of sexist pigs out there, and their education is critical, but also maybe limited in some ways as well. But I think the education also needs to go on the other side, because I think, and I fear that a lot of the women who are succeeding now have had to overcome a lot of difficulties and had to, I don't know how to put this in a way that doesn't sound bad, but they've almost had to be over thick-skinned in order to get to where they are. And that means that a lot of people have fallen by the wayside who didn't have that thick skin. And I read a really interesting article actually the other day about how the psychological aspect of a woman when she's in that place, it works differently from us men, of course. And the women need to know that it's totally fine. You stop being scared, go for it, because on the other side, men are getting more appreciative and more accepting of this. And so it's education on both sides that can bring this together. And then more women will be accepting and have the guts to go for it. And not only that top level who are, real tough girls, but also the ones who are not so tough. Doesn't mean they're not as good at leading a tech company, We don't only want the ones who have hard skin and can go through sometimes sexual harassment at the workplace and live to tell the tale. No, we want the people who also are a bit more gentle and delicate and have all the skills in the world to make it there. And so I think it's education both sides is what I'm trying to say, I reckon.
Thank you for sharing, Daniel. I mean, these are great points you make. And as I mentioned earlier, not only was it refreshing to read your article, but to hear how you're thinking. And I think anyone listening, whether you're a man or a woman, a young person getting into the working environment, or you're frustrated because you cannot move forward, listen to what Daniel just said. And of course, for me as a woman, this is still a frustrating topic. And I completely understand what you said, because let me give you a real example of misbalance, which happened to me personally. And this is recently, from a few months ago, because I lost over 30 grand on a project just because I'm a woman. And a man was chosen a few weeks earlier to do something that I could have done myself. So being a woman in that specific situation cost me around $30,000 loss, because although I was a front runner to do something, they chose somebody else, not because of their abilities, but because of gender. And this is not the first time it happens to me. I'm sure that it's not the first time that this happens to other women. Being a woman in many industries, no matter our abilities, we either get paid less or we are not chosen first, which means that we lose on financials. So what you said is right. We have to be so thick-skinned. We have to be so strong mentally. And to many women, this can affect their self-esteem because they start doubting themselves. And again, we're not talking about every high-powered executive that every woman wants to be a CEO or the top leader or a top sports person. We're talking on all the different levels of life that as a woman, no matter what, again, it's not just about equality, it's that we have to develop this, oh, just to smile and just deal with it because you're a woman, and you have to be okay with not being chosen just because. And this is where that article probably that you read, please do send me the link, because there are so many that and so much that we have to inspire. And I've always said, if this video or an article or anything you come across helps you or helps one person to get inspired to do more, then we've done our job. I mean, sports is an example. You're an expert on this. This is an industry where there is a huge pay gap, but that's a conversation for another day. So
Exactly.
I mean, for that one, we can talk for hours and end. So based on my last question, Daniel, what I would like to ask you is, what would you say then is stopping the C-level executives from taking action when it comes to giving more opportunities to women? What are the biggest challenges so we can achieve what both you and I have mentioned?
So I think it ties back to what we've said in the last couple of questions as well, is that it is a process. You know, people don't change overnight, and some people will never change. So then it's a question of that sort of age or mindset dying out, if you like, and being replaced by a new one. The market changes, people changes, but 20-year-olds think differently to the way I think, and there's no right or wrong, you know. And sometimes I question myself, am I a dinosaur now? Do I have old-fashioned ideas? Maybe. I would hope that I'm open-minded enough to think and listen to everyone around, but we never really know, let's face it, you know. And that's one of the things I always tell myself is you just don't know. We obviously, what we think is right, otherwise we wouldn't think it. But you start questioning yourself more and more. You've just got to find the balance so that you can at least move forward rather than constantly questioning yourself. But here I think there is a drive that is going well, but which is taking years, but that's just the way it is, based on education, based on understanding that, yeah, it's morally wrong to have this pay gap. It's morally wrong to say what happened to you just a few months ago, and it's horrible to hear that story, that you were passed upon because you're a woman, and it's ridiculous in this day and age, but it clearly still happens. So more and more people will understand that that just can't happen from a moral and ethical standpoint. More and more people need to understand that they have a lot to gain from a financial aspect if they bring in women, because the thinking process is different. And that's when the change is really going to happen, which is going back to what I said before, that education, and that will allow in parallel more women to be bold and go for it. I invested in a company very recently, actually, in the sports field, sports and tech, and the founder is a woman. And I announced it, and I deliberately, I think, we spoke about this a little bit. I thought, should I make a point of the fact that she's a female founder? And I said to myself, no, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. But unfortunately, it's still relevant. So I decided, and I'm very happy with it, I didn't make a point of it at all because I think it is irrelevant. But we are still living in an age where you do need to push a little bit, you know, and there are groups like Women in Sports Tech and Women Leaders, which until there's the balance, we need them. We need those groups to be able to educate. I look forward to the day when those groups are unnecessary, okay? But we're not there yet. So it's trying to find the balance of saying, look at this woman, she's an amazing founder, and look, she's a woman, or just saying she's an amazing founder. And I deliberately didn't raise that in my announcement because I know that had nothing to do with my investment. The investment was because I thought the company's great, I thought the founder's great, terrific. So it's all about accepting, always goes back to the same thing, accepting that different is good, it helps on every level, and that's the way we can go forward, again, together, as we always say.
Once again, I honestly don't know how many golden nuggets you've given already over these answers. And even now I'm going to be taking mental notes to take a few takeaways, because the one thing as well that you mentioned that I often share about as well is, again, education. And I think this applies to any kind of, not just field or gender inequality or diversity, any place where we're struggling is because of knowledge, is because we don't know. And I've always said we are about evolution. Whether it's technologies or humanity, ever since the caveman days, we have evolved into what I would say, hopefully, better human beings, not so much a better society. Again, that's also another topic for another day, but more about how can we be better. And we have done a lot over the next, I would say, 50, 60 years, if we look back to when women couldn't even work, as an example. So there has been a logical evolution, and I'm very also realistic to say that within my timeline, we are not gonna see that major change of equality where we won't have to highlight, oh, that is a woman doing it. But what you did as an example when you shared that article, again, I think it was the perfect thing, because we need the balance. We still need to highlight the power of, hey, wow, a woman made it. But at the same time, we need to get to that point within the next generations to come where it's based on the human being. We're far from that, but it starts with people like you, Daniel, like me, and like everybody else who thinks like us. And 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, as we all know, it'll equal to a larger number. I mean, that was so powerful, Daniel. So to end today, even though, as I said, I think we have material for many more videos, so stay tuned for the series of Daniel and Elise. I may have to rename the series.
You get top billing, right? It can only be Elise and Daniel.
Elise and Daniel, there we go. Yeah. So, okay, so my last question for today then, what are 2 or 3 key takeaways you can give us from having worked with women?
Okay, so, and by the way, I don't want it to come across on this video that I'm this perfect progressive male that never gets it wrong or whatever. My wife will testify to the fact that I still don't listen. Yeah, I still don't know how to do things that she's told me a million times.
I will ask your wife about that. That will get her on the next video.
You know, so I just want to make sure that it's all put into perspective here. And if I've mentioned listening, that is something that I'm continuously trying to work on, because I think I traditionally wasn't the best listener, as a lot of us alpha males are not. And I've been improving, I think. I still got a way to go, but I think that is one of the main things. And trying to work on when anyone's talking, but I notice it happens a lot when it's a woman, and this is a terrible thing to say, but like, I'm always thinking about what I'm going to reply, which is, that's not listening. Okay, I'm preparing my response. I'm talking about my wife. Sorry, I'm sharing a lot of personal stuff here. My wife talks to me and I just think, how am I going to respond to that? No, that's not listening. And that's why she complains about me a few times about this, this point. So listening, I think, is absolutely key. And understanding that the thought process is different. So often, and this is why a lot of men and women have arguments, you know, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, as the book says, and it's very true. We just think differently, okay? If we accept that we think differently, then we can just tune into that. And I think so much of the time we expect, and this goes both ways, by the way, that we expect the others to think like we do. And this is key, is that women don't think in the same way. We are very A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D. Okay, and women generally, it's a huge generalization, I don't want to offend anyone, but women are much more cyclical. They go around the block a few times before they get to that D, but it's not, that makes it sound like it's inefficient, but sometimes they'll jump straight to D and they won't even know why. They haven't even had to go through B and C, so it can be much more efficient. Understanding that the thought process is just different is the start, and it goes back to everything. Understanding, opening your mind to the fact that it's not like you is the way forward and the start for everything good that can happen. So I think that when there's a woman in the room and she says something that just sounds a bit weird, ask yourself, does it sound a bit weird because she's a bit weird? Or does it sound a bit weird because it's just not the way you would express it? And that's not always an easy question to answer, to be honest, but at least if you ask the question, you might get to the right answer at some stage.
That's so powerful. And I want to reiterate something, guys. Exactly what Daniel said. We're not having a conversation on this topic before he is the mega man that is supportive and does everything because of women. No, I love to have the perspective of the other side. I'm a woman. I cannot think like a man. So, and if you guys have watched my videos, there is a shout out right now to Professor Dr. Emre Alkin from Turkey, another amazing individual in my circle. He's like a brother to me. And he's also very supportive of women. So with him as an example, on International Women's Day, we've written articles together over the past 2-3 years, not because he's a champion of women, but because, again, I could never write from the perspective of a man. And I came across Daniel, who the first article I read was about women. But let me tell you guys, we will be talking about investing. We'll talk about his company, which I believe is super awesome, and plenty more topics, including technology. But today we're giving an homage to what it is to think from a different perspective and to just, again, work together. So another great video chat today, powerful insight shared on a topic that continue to be very relevant in our world today. And as I always say, and Daniel also believes, together we are stronger. This is Elise Quevedo. Until next time, thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Bye, Elise.